Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of the Anything But Sports podcast. My name is John Bowling, and I am the co-host for this episode.
And I'm Sawyer Holcomb, and I'm the junior host. John is teaching me how to become a true host. And today our guest is Joe Whalen. Hi, Joe.
Hey, everybody. Happy to be here.
Glad
Long-time listener, first-time caller.
So today we're going to be talking to Joe about just kind of his relationship with the industry and with media, and kind of like talk about how he's gotten to where he is now and where he wants to be in the future. So, Joe, how did you end up in media in the first place?
Let's see. So I went to a small college originally out of high school and wrestled and studied everything I could. I switched majors like 6 times. And then I had a quarter-life crisis and dropped out of school. And I lived in Australia for a year. And that's where I got a camera and started getting really into editing. I thought that was really cool. And I realized I should probably get a degree. I don't know if I should have, but I did. So I applied to UK, went back to UK. And that's where I started studying media.
And that's where we met as well.
That's where we met at the Media Depot.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the origins of how I got into it. Yeah.
So what do you think drew you into pursuing it full time?
I really didn't think that was an option. And my draw to media was really YouTube. And I was really into music videos and highlight videos. And just the idea of editing to music was what I thought was cool.
So do you have a specific part of the industry or the process that you do?
Yeah, so my full-time job is as a video editor in the online commercial space. And then my freelance stuff is mostly as a replay operator in sports broadcasting. I know this is anything but sports, but that is partially the world that I work in. Since the pandemic, I hardly do any shooting whatsoever, so I've really kind of just leaned into the editing side, and that's what I enjoy the most.
So you've found editing is what you enjoy the most?
Yeah, and I think that's through a lot of trial and error. Like, I feel like even since I've known both of you, that might have changed, or it definitely has changed. Mm-hmm. And I think that goes back to when I say, like, I didn't even know this could be a job. So when you find out there's so many parts to this huge thing, I don't think you know right away, like, this is my part, you know? And you also don't know to, like, focus on one thing. And so just through trial and error of, like, oh, this is acting, this is director of photography, this is directing. And then the pandemic kind of sorted that out for me in a way, because things became remote and all my time was spent editing. And editing in a new way, because we have people sending us phone videos or Zoom videos. Yeah. And you start to realize, to me, I just felt like it was the simplest thing to really hone, because you didn't depend on people to shoot or to help you with your shoot. It was really you and the material, and you could do what you wanted to with it.
I just think that's fascinating, because the pandemic taught me that I hate editing and that I never want to do it again.
Don't get me wrong, I still have work that is very monotonous and it's a lot of scrubbing, but I know that it started to reveal itself to me, because I know people that said the same thing, that like hated scrubbing through interviews, and I actually really enjoy that. I find it a little bit soothing to really chop up what somebody's saying, even if it's an hour of like garbage, and then there's 10 minutes that you're like, wow, I made them sound good.
So initially, when you were juggling editing with working in sports broadcast, how did that work in your life, especially since you're married now?
Mm-hmm. That's still working itself out, for good and for bad. Basically, I work on a project basis myself. In my mind, it's project by project, and if I get the project done, that's okay. But I'm still a full-time employee for a company. Sure. So I think in their eyes, they would prefer me to be fully dedicated to that. Mm-hmm. So what I end up doing is moving my hours around. Maybe I work a little bit in the evening and edit a project, because I know the next day I'm going to have to cut out early and work a show in sports broadcasting.
So how did you find sports broadcasting, and why are you interested in this?
So really, I never thought about it ever. Like I said, I was really just, my first exposure was like YouTube is king. I thought YouTube videos, and I still really like YouTube videos and what can be done on that platform. So that was really what I focused on. But then being in Atlanta, I really wanted to get local work. Even if I had to keep my day job, I just wanted some sense of connection to the city. I felt really strange working for this company in St. Louis and having no like peer group in the industry and not having any connection to it. Mm-hmm. So I took a gig filming pro wrestling, and that was my first exposure to live sports. But I did that and I was like, this is really cool. I liked the intensity of it, and I liked that it was live. And we've talked about this before, but what I really liked is when that's over, because it's live, it's over.
Yeah.
And there's not going to be a revision to it. There's not going to be watching the film, the short film, and saying, this is what we could improve, receiving critique. If it goes bad, it does go bad, and you learn from it. But it's live, and it's over. And when you leave, you leave. From there, I just started seeking out opportunities to get more involved in it and learn about it, because I still didn't know what was available as far as jobs in that industry.
It almost seems like it's the definition of the opposite of editing.
Yeah, in a way, but you know, what I do more now with replay, it is like live editing. Mm-hmm. So there is some crossover there. The thing that's different really is that you don't take it home with you because you can't.
Are you interested in transitioning full-time to live sports and live editing and stuff?
Yeah, I'm interested in it, and I think we can unpack that more. I think within media, you guys would know this too. From project to project, your emotions can go a little up and down, and your passion can wax and wane. You know, so there'll be times where it's like, this is all I want to do, but then won't feel that way, and I'm kind of happy I have the relief to get back to editing at home. Mm-hmm. You know, so I am interested in that, but I'm trying to change something in my own outlook where previously I can be very black and white and kind of lock myself in and say, this is what it has to be, this is the end all be all. But I'm learning to be a little more open and see what I like about it and be honest with myself. Like, I do like this, or this isn't working, or I'm happy I have my day job still.
Right. So would you consider editing right now almost a crux to fall on, just in case sports broadcasting doesn't work out?
I wouldn't put it that way. I think there's different pieces to the life pie, you know, and finances are part of that.
Yeah.
And right now I think it is a fallback financially, but not just in case, because I still, like I said, I'll get a project come across my desk that I am really enjoying. Like right now I have something that I've been surprised by that I really am enjoying editing. And that's also the thing I like about editing and being in that state, being in an editing bay, is you learn what you don't know. And every time you learn something new, it's kind of exciting. Mm-hmm. So that's what brings you back to it. You know, right when you feel like, man, I could never look at Premiere again. Right. It's like you learn something very small that is appealing to you, and you kind of get revamped back up.
So how would you define success?
I think that's changed for me over the years, for sure.
What do you think it used to be?
For me, it used to be really about recognition, I would say. I don't think I really ever thought about like financial success or like even necessarily the quality of the product, or you know what I mean? Like, I think I skipped over that. I knew that you need a good product to be successful, but I think it was really just on the career itself and being recognized as a master of whatever area you're working in. That was success to me. I think now it's more having some control over your life, because it is an industry that even in sports, and definitely from what I've heard on sets, can really suck you in and call you to be only focused on that. I mean, family kind of falls to the wayside. Your values can get compromised, and your free time to do anything outside of that and have like a chance to breathe can really just disappear, because you're working such long hours and it's so competitive. Yeah. So anytime you think you're taking off, it's like, wow, somebody else could be getting ahead of you. So now it's more, success to me is mastering something while maintaining some autonomy so you can make some choices within your career and within your life.
Do you think you can be a master of something without devoting your entire life to it?
Yes, I now do believe that, and it's a thing that requires balance, and I think, is very hard to strike. But I think that what doesn't get talked about is what can come from having that space to step away for a second, or having that's how creativity works. It's not, I'm going to sit down right now and be creative and the stuff is going to come to me.
Right.
It's in the shower, it's on a walk, it's listening to music in your car when you're not on the set. Because when you're in the mix of it is just focused on that. So anything extra, there's no space for that to kind of percolate. It's almost a requirement, but it's a hard balance to strike. You don't want to say, I'm taking 2 months off, because you are going to fall behind, especially in this industry. That's just the fact of the matter. Things change so quick. People are constantly working at the craft, so you will fall behind if you're not making connections, if you're not improving.
When did you make that change? When did you change your definition of success?
I think when I got married,
Yeah.
or when I started thinking about getting married.
If you had not decided to get married and you had continued living as a single man, do you think that your definition of success would have stayed as it was, that mastery is success?
Yeah, I think so. I think I would have eventually, because I'm trying to think back when I actually was in a very rough state prior to getting married. Me and my wife were, prior to getting engaged. It was like, are we going to do this or not? And a lot of what was holding me back was career, but also I think what would have ended up taking the place of, for that success question, is like a hobby. Mm-hmm. And I would have let that all be my life. And at the time for me it was climbing, and climbing would have been like my wife, and the success would have been I have some balance between my career mastery and being able to climb. Mm-hmm. So I think something else would have taken that place of marriage, but I also think that would have still been falling short of what I'm ultimately see as successful now. But I do think it would have been easier to fall back into a habit of it has to be just the career. Because you have the space and you have the time. You don't have to think about somebody else necessarily.
You definitely have the unfortunate option of just diving straight into your work and not worrying about anything else.
Right. And I mean, just from a practical standpoint, being up later, editing, and getting too far gone and not having somebody to notice that you might be going off the deep end and you don't have that accountability, that can be troublesome.
Joe, take us through the process of moving to Atlanta. What made you come down here?
So I was living in St. Louis, working for the company I still work for now, but I wasn't remote. And we weren't really happy with the city. Nothing against St. Louis. I think it's a great city to visit. Yeah. We just didn't really like living there. And we felt like, much like you guys, there's just more opportunity in Atlanta. My wife's originally from the Atlanta area as well. Mm-hmm. And so it seemed like a way to both kind of take a leap of faith, but also have a little bit of a safety net, because we had some connections here. And then ultimately, as we took that leap of faith, my wife ended up getting a job here. What started as a move for me ended up really working out for her, which was nice. And I thought I would find a job right away. And it was just freelance, and she's got a secure job. So that was interesting. But yeah, that was really kind of the catalyst for it.
So the reasons why you moved to Atlanta, do you feel like you've checked all those boxes and found the things that you were looking for?
Not completely, but we've had a whole lot of affirmations, if you will, my wife getting the job. And then even I say I didn't get a full-time gig, but just being exposed to opportunities much quicker than I was in St. Louis was kind of affirming, there is a lot here. It's more competitive, but there's a bigger pot to pull from. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And the people as well in the industry I've found have been nicer.
Yeah. So who do you want to be in 5 years?
I think I can get specific and then like branch out. I still feel like I said with editing, what I like about it is there's so much, I learn what I don't know, like on a daily basis. So for me, like a smaller thing is I just want to be more organized as an editor and be prepared to take on bigger projects, bigger clients, and things of that nature. I want to really feel like I am ready to take that on. That's on like the career side. And then I think as far as like designing my life, I want to be in a place where I don't have to pull all-nighters ever. That's like a small goal I have, because I still get in a way of juggling multiple things and putting off the thing that might be more mundane or like monotonous, and then I end up pulling an all-nighter because I can't walk away from it until I'm like really satisfied with it. So I'd like to be in a place where I'm organized enough and I have the wisdom to know when it's done and step away, and I don't have to pull all-nighters. Because I would eventually like to have, part of my success in having that autonomy is being able to make the choice to have a family and be there with the family.
Do you think it's achievable to have a family, be with a family, and still have a good job in media?
Yes, I do. But here's the thing. It's like a two-sided coin maybe, because I think it does require you to have a lot of mastery. I think when you're on the fringes and you're not really that great yet, you haven't like crossed that threshold, you're going to be scrambling a bit because you still need to prove yourself or improve on something, and you're really focused on that. But I think it is achievable. I'm a bit of an optimist, but I think when you get to a level where you are one of the better people in that specific area, you can say no to things. You can say yes to the bigger things that might be more efficient with your time, you know? If you say yes to 20 very low budget gigs, that's very inefficient compared to saying yes to 3 that might be paying you a fair wage.
I think one of my biggest fears in being in a committed relationship, and even the concept of having a family, is not the fact that you can say no, but that you have to say no sometimes. I know that it's like what you're saying, like you need to have pieces of the pie and they all need to exist and be healthy and be taken care of. But it is terrifying to me, the idea of not being able to say yes to something that interests me.
Yeah, and I share that fear with you. And I think that's a good thing about having a healthy relationship with your spouse and being able to communicate. Because there's sometimes I feel like, for me, I assume too much and think I have to say no to this project or whatever because it is becoming too much. But being able to communicate that usually works out, and she's understanding for me. But yeah, I don't, there are times where I'm like, man, I'm going to have to say no to this because I have that other slice of the pie to kind of tend to.
So you and I have known each other for a while, and I know some of the projects that we have worked on together and some of the stuff that you've made without me before we met. Would you ever do that again? Are you ever interested in making like creative content like that again?
I think yes, but still focused on, you start to realize what you're good at and what you're bad at. And I think that's a very important trait, to really be honest with yourself. Because when you don't know what you're good at or what you're bad at, it's hard to ask for help as well. So that's why it's important. And then also, you're just inefficient with your time when you're juggling too many things. So to answer your question, I still think I like the post side of things and directing that. Like, I still feel like I have some directorial control in editing, because oftentimes, for better and for worse, my creative director is like, this is what we got. There's no direction whatsoever. Like, in their eyes, directing is, I put somebody in front of the camera, shot them, and then have some B-roll. But all the directing to me happens after the fact, and you're directing the footage as opposed to directing the people. But I just learned from projects we worked on together that I wasn't that good at directing. Like, I didn't really know how to articulate what I wanted from people on set. And you need to have that to be a director. But I could articulate it in post. Like, even when I'm working with an animator, I can send them a rough design of what I want them to do and like direct them through that. But I really need those tools to be able to articulate it. I can't just be like, this is what it is.
Let's take what you like right now and what you know you dislike, and let's go back to when you were living in Australia. If you had this knowledge, what would you have done differently?
Nothing. Because I do think, I'm saying all of this, you do need some exposure to know, to learn. I really don't think there's any way to know without at least dipping your toe into a few things and getting in over your head on projects. Mm-hmm. You know, shortly after projects where I got in over my head, I'm like, man, I regret all of that. But then when you have some time to breathe, you realize there's some nuggets of wisdom there that you can take away. So, like, Australia was very pivotal to me, you know. Like, I learned the ins and outs of editing, and I just shot on a GoPro, and it's super cringy stuff, but you, like, realize how far you've come, too, you know. So I wouldn't change any of that.
So would you say that you value failing?
Yeah. One thing I would say, though, is you need to fail as quick as possible.
Interesting. What do you mean by that?
So somebody actually from Asbury told me that, a guy named Cody Geiler. He told me, you know, fail fast. And I didn't exactly in the moment know what he meant. But I think when you're working on small projects on your own, it's very good. But you don't know what level of criticism is genuine from your peer group. Mm-hmm. And they can kind of feed into whatever you want to hear.
Yeah.
So you're not really ever failing. But when you have somebody outside of that circle, maybe a client you're depending on, or people that have volunteered their time to your project that aren't necessarily your friends or just become your friends, you fail. You can see the failure there and learn from that. So, yeah, I think that's really important. I value failure, but if you can do it quicker and be under the microscope quicker, it's better because you really learn from it.
In your mind, Joe, how do you justify failing professionally as opposed to failing when you're just kind of practicing, right?
Mm-hmm. I think it depends on the environment that you're in. I haven't been on a feature set or a large production beyond sports. Mm-hmm. But in sports broadcasting, I've seen failures happen. I've failed before. But from what I hear, compared to being on set, it's a little bit more forgiving, even though it's live. And you're not going to get fired on the spot. And people actually know that you will fail. And the big thing there is to forget failure quick in a way. And I don't mean forget the lessons you learned, but if you're focused on what you just messed up on and you're dropping F-bombs and screaming, you're further tanking the production, the show, whatever you're working on. And that's when somebody's not going to have you back. But if you move on from it quick, maybe apologize. But most of the time, I don't think you should. If you move on and make it right as much as you can, that's when you really learn from it. So it you know, you're going to be in situations where somebody's had a day and they're dealing with stuff in their own life, and maybe they're like, "You're done." But I haven't come across that.
I think it is very similar on set. And honestly, in my opinion, the standards for employees on a film set are quite low. And like if you show up and use more than 2 or 3 of your brain cells, then you're like better than most. Mm-hmm. And so like the majority of people will quickly move past a failure if you do.
Yeah, I mean, you had some exposure to that, if you want to talk about that or not.
I'll tell it. So
I just think that's a really good example, though.
I guess that's true. Yeah. So what Joe's referring to is Joe actually got me a job filming a football game. It was an online streamed football game.
He is a traitor to abs.
Yeah,
he's an imposter.
I film sports. I'll say it. But I was hired as a cam op, and I was like, okay, fine, this is going to be easy. I can operate a camera. I'm good at it. But what I did not consider that was only like that was a lot of what I was doing. But it's also a football game, and it definitely helps to understand how a football game works and like who these people are and what they're trying to do and the rules of the game. And so I show up, and our director goes, "All right, new guy, you're going to be on camera 1, and you're going to be on the quarterback." Which initially I was terrified, but it actually turned out that was the best job for me because all I had to do was find one guy and just follow that one guy. At least I wasn't following a play. I don't even know what a play is. And so I barely figured out in time who the quarterback was. And it was going okay. I was super sweaty. My watch alerted me and said my heart rate has been really high for over an hour, and it was a health concern. But finally I was like, okay, I think I got this. And towards the end of one of the games, they switched out the quarterback for, I don't know, the secondary quarterback or whatever. And that completely evaded me. I followed my guy off to the sidelines. And my director is yelling
Sawyer.
at me in my ear like, Camera 1, get on the quarterback. Get on the quarterback. And he starts raising his voice, and he's very frustrated, rightfully so. And I am panicking, trying to find the new quarterback. I don't know what any of the positions are. I don't know where he's supposed to be. I don't know who he is. I barely even know what team I'm supposed to be shooting at this point. And he goes, oh my God, you don't know who the quarterback is, do you? Over the head.
I didn't know he said that.
Yeah. And it was absolutely humiliating. And another camera operator had to unmute their microphone, and they told me what number the quarterback was. And then I found him, locked onto him, and we moved on. But that was one of the most embarrassing things that has ever happened to me. And then we finished those 4 games, and I got an email that week, and I was hired back on for the next time.
So, yeah, I mean, and that didn't happen again.
And it didn't happen again.
And they still called you back. That's why I think that's a good example of that. But I'll never forget, because I did say something like, here's the thing, and you guys have talked about kind of climbing the rungs in the industry, and PA is kind of the bottom. And in sports broadcasting, there are some PAs depending on the show, but the bottom is usually utility. And every utility wants to either be an audio guy or a cam op. And Sawyer never was a utility, and there's guys that have been working for a year, maybe 2 years, that hadn't got their shot as a cam op, but for whatever reason he was forward and said, I want to do this, and they said yes to him. And I was like, have you done sports broadcasting, or have you done broadcast operation? And he was like, I'm sure I can figure this out. And I was sure he could figure it out. It wasn't that. It was that side of it. You do need to know. And so when I got on set to the show, I remember you coming out and you were sweating, and you said, I realize how unqualified I am for this. I know nothing about sports.
Yeah, well, I moved on quickly, like you said, and I was humiliated in my head, but, on the outside, I just tried to move on. And I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah. Have you ever gotten yelled at on set?
Yeah.
What was the
Many
worst?
times.
What was the number one?
Well, what was the worst time where it was your fault?
Yeah, that's a good clarifier.
The worst time where it was my fault was I was working in the Home Alone house, and this is for a corporate gig. And the house is renovated. It obviously does not look like what it was in the movie. And they had a table, very, very similar to this, except it was fancy and cost a lot of money. We had this goo substance. I forgot exactly what they were using it for, but I accidentally got some on the table. And the table, I think, had some kind of finish on it. So I went and got scissors and tried to scrape it off the table. And I made very small marks, almost unnoticeable, on the table. And what I should have done was told my boss, right? But I knew that they were going to come back into town, and I was afraid that if I did tell them, that they wouldn't hire me back. So I was like, these aren't noticeable. They're not huge white marks running all the way down the table. They're not going to notice it, right? So I get to set that next morning, and my boss is like, John, did you make these scratches? I was like, yes. But they did end up hiring me back. So, again, it's just you just kind of got to get over it,
And who was this? Were they a production coordinator? Who were they?
It was a coordinator and a manager were both there, and they both saw it. But they did have to get someone, they had to call someone to come refinish the table.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, can you believe that? anyway, so I learned from that even if you make like the simplest mistake, that you need to tell, like you need to be honest about it, and it's not even that I lied to them. I didn't lie to them, right? Like I didn't say, no, sorry, that wasn't me. I fessed up to it when it came time.
How do you think they would have reacted if you had told them immediately?
A lot better. I think that they would have been like, oh, look how responsible this guy is. Let's definitely hire him back next time, right? So, the lesson really is, if you're in the Home Alone house, don't scratch the table. But yeah, that it really begs the question, right? Because we were talking about how you felt unqualified after the show. How many people on set do you think aren't qualified for their positions?
I haven't been on a
let's
similar
say
set.
Sports broadcasting.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Or even in your corporate job.
Yeah. How many are unqualified?
Like percentage-wise.
Yeah. I'd say like 10%.
Well, how do you think those people got there?
Here's the thing that's not talked about. It's kind of like a catch-22. And people talk about this with jobs, like, you don't have enough experience, but how do I get experience?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. You kind of have to do what Sawyer did and jump into the deep end to get that experience. But when you do that, you're probably going to get yelled at a couple of times. Like, it's going to happen. It's inevitable. Like, nobody in this industry is born a savant and has this smooth path where they did this wrong, and there's no failure, and that's how they got there. That's just going to be too slow for one, and you're not going to learn anything. I'd say 100% of people, when they start any position, are unqualified.
It's more about learning quickly than it is coming into the position being qualified.
Yeah, and I think people want you to be confident.
Yeah.
They'll be mad when you fail and maybe be like, why didn't you tell me you didn't know how to do this? But they also don't want to take ownership over the fact that they kind of want you to say that you can do this and see if you can do this. I think they do. They don't want you to be like, I need a little more time in this position.
I would definitely rather fail at something better than what I'm currently doing than do really well at something lesser than what I'm currently doing.
Right, that's a great point too. Yeah. And things still happen when you are qualified. That's the thing. So true. It's like you waited all this time and waited till you had the experience, and then in your lower job you failed. You get paid less and yelled at the same. Yeah. So
I think the best thing that you can do is not avoid failure, but try to surround yourself and find people who will allow you to fail and understand that failing is part of the learning process. Mm-hmm. That's the rarest part, but they're out there. I mean, I've worked with people on set who, when I fail, they say, well, it happens, let's just move on.
Yeah, I think the majority, you always are going to have bad situations every now and then, like somebody's got something else going on, but the majority of people are pretty understanding. I like to think of it that way. Like, even if it's just one person who yelled at you, everybody else might not have that same kind of posture, Mm-hmm.
So, Joe, we're going to try to wrap up this podcast. What one word do you think you would use to describe the theme of this conversation that we've had here today?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy. I was worried about this question, but now I think the easy answer is fail.
That's not what I expected you to say, you're going to be honest. But it works.
What'd you expect I was going to say?
Not fail. Some other word, I don't know.
What was your all's word?
Compromise.
All right, everybody. Thanks as always for tuning in to Abs, Anything But Sports. Catch us next time. Goodbye.